All right, folks, I know everybody has its own brackets, all right? But if you want to have an educated guess, all right, not just wishing or hoping, if you want to have an educated guess at what is the highest bracket that you can expect AMC to trade at within, or at the top of the short squeeze, then you are in the right video. I'm going to try to share with you in this video, all right, some of the underlying issues or reasons why this hasn't moved yet. The short squeeze hasn't happened yet as we all expect it to happen, all right? And based on what is currently taking shape, based on what is currently taking, happening in this market in order to address that underlying issue, then you will get to the conclusion with me that, hey, maybe this was a little bit bigger than what I even imagined, all right? So let's get into this. First off, the number one reason, we all know this, the share price hasn't been trading in the hundreds or the 500s or the thousands yet, is simply because of the manipulation. All right, there is no way around it. It's simply because of that. But this is such a huge scheme involving many parties, involving many groups, many institutions that actually used to do that in the past. And because this is becoming too big of a deal in order to deal with, even for those companies that are found as some cut in the midst of it, well, authorities are taking the bull by the horns. And that's precisely why when you look at what I'm going to share with you in a second here, you will actually see how big AMC could be. Like literally this could be I don't even think or expect we could have something this big once this thing unfolds. Why? Here with me. First off, in 1995, that's when everything started, because prior to 1995, all right, the market was just going up and up and up and up for literally a decade, all right? Everything was great. People in the pension funds, in the 401ks, in the IRAs, they were making a lot of money. Every single month when they will receive, the reports, it will be a gain after a gain after a gain. And this for years until 1990, the 90s came with the internet bubble, all right? Because bunch of these companies that were being IPO'd, that were being publicly traded based on the internet booming. You had cloud companies, you had the Microsoft, you have, the Apples, you have all of these companies that were surrounding around the internet space that were just exploding. So everybody was rushing into these stocks. And then at some point, it became something that was a bubble, meaning you had some people that bought so much, some of the things that were not even supposed to be as high when it comes to the share price. And ultimately, it had to bust. The bubble just exploded. And that's why people lost a lot of money. That was the kind of first crisis in the modern stock market with the internet bubble. And then a decade later, a little bit over a decade later, we had the 2008 financial crisis. Why? Because after a specific crisis, you have the regulators, you have, the authorities, the government trying to see exactly how can we prevent this from happening again. So for another, kind of 18 or 15 years, things were good until they were not. Or they were not anymore. And that's when we also had the 2008 financial crisis, because everybody was just buying a house independently on how much money they were making. People were having janitor's job. Nothing wrong against janitors, or not that it's not a decent job. No, but for the amount of money you're making, mopping or cleaning floors, it doesn't make sense that you will have enough money to pay a mortgage for a $300,000 house. They were not doing any due diligence. And as a result, we came to a point where it started to be so smelly, it started to be so chaotic that these banks tried to package this in a way that they were selling it between each other. The MBS, the mortgage-backed securities. I'm going to sell you these credits based on these people that bought the houses and took loans from banks. All right. So I'm working with banks in order to actually try to feel as if, everything is under control. Everything is good. Still with me so far? Stick with me for another minute. So 2008 was another major crisis because not only it affected financial markets, the real estate market, but more importantly, the economy. And that's when things became really, really bad. So now, after 2008, we had few kind of regulations, few rules that were put into place in order to try to do the exact same thing that happened in the 90s. How can we prevent this from happening? Because there are some companies that were too big to fail. Fannie Mae was another example. All the banks were literally bought out by the government because if they filed bankruptcy, it would be the end of capitalism, literally. Now, as NASDAQ is now unrelenting declines, a dot-com bust alarm bell. Some people in the market, some analysts, some experts think that what we're seeing now in the NASDAQ may also be a sign of what we saw back in 2008 and even the 90s with the dot-com bubble, because we have so many stocks that are so high that you when you look at the books, you do a financial analysis, it doesn't make that much sense why a company not even making money yet for the last 5 years, it's being traded at 100 times the amount of earnings that are supposed to come, but they are not here yet. So is it going to come? Nobody knows, not necessarily. But the point is, when you look at stuff like this, all right, the SEC trying to bring back transparency, bring public trust back to the stock market, because with everything that happened here in 2008, lots of people lost confidence into the market. And if you don't have trust in the market for retail investors, from banks doing business with other banks, you end up with items like this. The Citadel, one of the biggest liquidity provider and market maker in the market, working with some of the biggest banks, is now being under investigation. Why? Because they know that if they don't do something, if the government with all the federal agencies and authorities don't do something, it is going to be something that will be similar and even worse to what we had here in 2008. So is it a coincidence? No, it is not. The conclusion is, with what is happening here on what the SEC is doing, the DOJ is doing, the FTCC, they are working all together because it's a matter of survival. If they don't fix this issue of few companies working together with research firms can issue a paper saying what and why I'm going against this company for no specific reason, you can just scare investors and the share price will go down. Hence, these other companies, because they have big pockets, will profit off of that scheme, which is, by the way, illegal. So if they don't fix this, it is going to be a little late when people are already pulling all the money from the market. And this could also be worse than what we had in 2008 and in the 1995, 90s with the internet bubble. So all of this relates to AMC in one single way. AMC has been so shorted to oblivion that it's just being the masterpiece around this whole fixing. Why? Because it's not as if they are going and targeting AMC specifically. No, it's just that by trying to fix what could be a chaotic event, a disaster for nobody, and nobody wants that, because you don't want to have a bunch of companies filing bankruptcy. You don't want to have a bunch of people losing their jobs right after what we had in 2020. All right. So everybody is trying to clean up the mess that this crisis actually exposed through stocks like AMC and GameStop. And that's why now that you understand this, and now that you kind of get the idea of what should happen or what is already happening and already in motion, it kind of makes sense now that, well, with the amount of billions of shares allegedly out there that were fabricated to prevent AMC from soaring back in January 2021, which, by the way, those people who bought those millions of shares are still here and are still buying. So it's no wonder why we have other banks, other, hedge funds, other companies actually looking into, hey, maybe if I still want to make money in 2022, like I did in 2021, even with the market does going to be a little bit tighter, then AMC should be the way to go because of what it's coming and how AMC will be soaring and benefiting from what is going around in this current market. It's inevitable, all right? That, this is not speculation. It is inevitable. It is going to happen, all right? Now, the only question is, how big would it go? So going back to the highest bracket, man, be my guess. Is it 10,000? Is it 100,000? Is it 500,000? Everybody has its guess. Everybody has its highest number, its floor or its ceiling. But the reality is, independently on how high it goes, what is your high? That's the key in here, because your high may not be my high. 10,000 for you may be enough while I'm waiting for 20,000, or with the amount of shares that I have, 1,000 should be enough for me to actually, or even 3,000 should be enough for me to be totally not having to worry about money for generations to come in my family tree. All right. So as I mentioned, now that you know exactly what is happening and what is supposed to come, all right, it will give you more incentive or more insights on how high it can go. But remember, my high is not necessarily your high.